Our oral history microphone is once again in operation. This is Ray Mofield, and today we're going to be interviewing Elza Bloomingburg, now residing in the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. I guess Arlington, Virginia, actually. But I believe he was born in Marshall County and lived here a good many years.
Right.
You were...
I was born in Marshall County in the Oak Valley area.
In the Oak Valley area, and you are about
90
years old?
90 years old. I was born December 1894.
And there was an Oak Valley back then?
Far back as I can remember, there was an Oak Valley. There may not have been at the time I was born, but as first I can remember going to church, it was in the old schoolhouse at Oak Valley.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that was broken off of, from the Branchburg congregation.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my first memory of going to Sunday school.
And there was a school right there just across the road from it.
That's right across the road from where the church is now.
And I wonder why they built there. Was that a spring there, maybe? Or?
There's a spring,
Uh-huh.
just a short distance above the schoolhouse.
Well, that frequently happened in Pioneer
That happened,
times,
that's right. They built homes or schools.
where you had a water supply.
Where you had a water supply, that's what we had.
Well, would you happen to remember, well, before we do that, let's go back and get your father and mother's name.
My father's name is George Wesley Bloomingburg. And my mother's name is Miriam Matilda Peck.
So the Pecks and the Bloomingburgs were intertwined there.
That's right.
There are a good many Pecks still in the neighborhood.
That's right.
And several
Bloomingburgs
as well.
That's right. The congregation is still largely made up of Bloomingburgs and Pecks.
Now
that's related.
By the congregation, you're talking about the Oak Valley Church of Christ.
Oak Valley Church of Christ, that's right.
Well, that's good. So, do you happen to remember the grandparents on either side?
I remember my grandfather and grandmother on my mother's side, Benjamin Peck and Sarah Jones Peck.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my grandmother, I don't remember her age, but she probably was approximately 45 when she died. My grandfather lived to be 83.
Mm-hmm.
I remember them quite well.
Now, you have a brother that's soon going to be 101.
That's right,
so
in November.
There's a long life for the Bloomingburg family.
That's right. As a general rule, that was not the case. Several of them died younger, but I'll be 91 in December.
You remember how many there were in your family? Now, you
Yes.
said some of them died younger.
Yes.
I think I recall a Walter who died.
Yes, well, there were 12 children born.
Mm-hmm.
One girl, older than I, lived only one day.
Mm-hmm.
And then the baby, Hurley Ray, lived about 7 or 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
But there were 10 children lived to be grown.
Mm-hmm.
And I can name all of them, it's not necessary, I guess. But
Well, of course, my father-in-law, Ezra, lived to be about, I think it was 74, maybe.
74, he died in 70.
Or maybe he
74,
died
72, he died in 74.
Yeah,
He was born in 1902 and died in 74, I think.
I
He's
believe
about
you're
72
right.
years old.
I had the year there.
Yeah, that's
confused
right.
with the,
Well, see, Ed, if you want me to name them, it was Ed.
well, you don't have to name
Okay.
all of them as far as that's concerned. Let's,
But there were 10 of us lived to
Mhm.
be grown.
Now, I presume your dad was a farmer. About
Yes.
everybody was then.
He was a farmer. He preferred to work in timber, saw logs and such things, but he was a farmer, and they lived, as far back as I can remember, they lived on their own farm.
Mm-hmm.
They had bought the farm when they were younger and lived on the back of the farm, but I was born out in the old house that you knew about.
Mm-hmm. All right. Do you happen to remember any of the school teachers you had? You don't have to try to remember all of them. Just
I remember the first one was McCoy Reader.
I don't believe I've heard that name before, and that's good. We try to get new names on the program.
And Miss Verda Hoover.
Mm-hmm.
I can't never remember them all, but I can never
Yeah.
remember them. And Miss Lena White, I believe was her name.
Mm-hmm.
And Walter Peck, Early Johnson.
Now, would Walter Peck have been related to you in any
He
way?
was related. He was a Walter Peck Jr.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And Sidney Johnson, back to those days.
Uh-huh.
Lamar Rose, Yule Sled,
Well, I think you're naming all of them.
most of them.
That's good.
And there's a few others in there possibly in this.
Now, you must have been a rather good student. Did you,
Well,
you like
I
school?
I liked school, but you know, we grew tobacco in those days, and we didn't go to school till tobacco was cut in the barn. Then for a few weeks we went to school and stopped to pick corn.
Mm-hmm.
So our school year was pretty badly broken up, and the schools were out in about January, February. And the only other schooling I got was occasionally somebody would have what they call a subscription school. We had to pay a tuition
Mm-hmm.
and go for 8 or 10 weeks. One of those was your sled. I went to school in New Harmony about 8 or 10 weeks. And another one was at Griggs School when Mattie Borland, I think it was her name at that time,
Mm-hmm.
taught for about that many weeks. They would get those schools after our regular school years were over, and we paid tuition for it.
You know, that is about like it was when I went. We started about the 1st of July,
Yeah.
and then
that's right.
school was out just, well, in January.
January, February.
So long in there.
And during that time, it was broken up. We really didn't have much chance to get.
Well, in many of the states, for example, Tennessee, which is near here, and in southeast Missouri, many of them took a couple of weeks off to pick cotton.
Yes, we didn't take. They didn't let the school out. We kids just had to take out. And
You simply had to work.
we had to work. We
And,
didn't go to school until the tobacco was in the barn.
Now, farming then was pretty much a case of manpower and mule power.
That's right. And my father and my older brother, Ed, had cleared up a lot of ground in the Clarks River bottom, and we had to plow those among the stumps and all that stuff. It was hard work.
Oh, I can remember how double shovels kicked.
Yeah, double shovels and even a single shovel with a coulter on it.
Uh-huh. Bull tongue plow.
Full tongue plow. One horse, 3 times the row.
Uh-huh.
But it made good corn, but it was work.
Yeah. Well, then you said you grew tobacco. Now, just about everything about tobacco was hard. But
Everything was hard. It was an annual crop. You planted your tobacco beds in the early spring, and you wouldn't get it stripped and off the market until
just a little bit before you started again.
Started again. That's right. It's a 12 months crop almost.
I remember my father, in a few years, growing dark fired.
Yeah.
He'd burn a plant bed, maybe in some good weather in January.
That's right.
And occasionally he wouldn't sell till February. So he said it took 13 months.
It took at least 12 months, or around 12, 13 months.
Yeah.
And that was hard work.
Well, hay was hard in
Hay
those
was
days.
hard. You had to mow it and use a fork with it.
And pitch it into
Pitch it,
either stacks or up in the loft.
Up in the loft, that's right. Or bale it with 2 horses or 2 mules.
Baling wasn't very easy either.
That wasn't easy. You had to feed that baler.
Yeah.
It was hard work, but I guess it's good for us, kept us busy.
Now, when you got a little bit older, I understand that maybe you taught school some.
Yes, I had told my father was deceased, and I told my mother and my older brother, Ed, that I wanted to go to school all year, 1 year. She had been so broken before that.
Mm-hmm.
And they finally decided to let me start the first school. And then from that on, I was able to take an examination occasionally. And I didn't get high school, but I did pass the examination. I taught school 2 years. In 1916, I taught at McCain School.
About where was McCain located?
It's
Was it?
on the bottom road.
So it's between Oak Valley and Sharp, down in there?
Between Oak Valley and Sharp. Yes, it's below the Greek Stadium.
Mm-hmm.
It's right about where Charlie Angle lives now, if you know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I taught at McCain School in 1916. And then I was married to Sonny Armstrong. And then I taught at Oak Valley 1917.
So you came back to your home school?
Came back to my home school and taught a year.
Did you find that to be very difficult?
Well, it was pretty difficult for me, although I got along as well at Oak Valley as I did at the other. But, you know, we didn't have a lot of training for teaching. You just had to do what you thought was best. And you had all grades.
All the grades were in one room?
In one room. That's right. All the grades in one room. Had to do the best you could with all those grades.
Well,
But you could get along with most people, and you got along with most of the parents pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
The parents, as a general rule, cooperated with the teacher. Teacher didn't have too many enemies among the parents.
So you had to teach reading, writing, arithmetic, spelling,
everything.
Geography?
Geography, that's right.
You taught every subject?
We call it grammar.
Yes.
Some of those things are a mixture of English and grammar and stuff like that. And then, my brother had been in Bowling Green in school, and he'd taken a civil service examination and got an appointment in Washington. I decided I wanted to go to Washington, so in January I took an examination in civil service, and I got an appointment, and I moved to Washington and started working on the 16th of April, 1918.
Well, now we'll come back to that in just a minute, but you mentioned a moment ago that you married
Sonny
Armstrong. Now, where did you meet her?
We were in school at Oak Valley.
So she was that same neighborhood?
Same neighborhood, same school. That's right.
And you, of course, kind of grew up with her.
Grew up with her. We grew up together. I was a little older, but we grew up together, went to school together. And
So I guess in a case like that, you really don't know just when you fell in love.
no. You just see a lot of them, you know, and there were not many parties in those days, Ray. It was mostly work, you know.
Yeah.
But at church.
You went to church together, and
that's right. And
maybe you shelled peas together or something or other.
And, well, we had meetings, you know, and you walk home from meetings at evenings.
Her mother and father, do you remember?
Her mother passed away when she was only 5 years old. And I remember about the time her mother died, about 1902. But I don't remember seeing her. But her father lived until 1932.
Yes.
We were living in Washington at that time, or in Virginia. We in 1918 we moved to Washington, and from that time on we lived up there. And her father was still living at that time. and she had one sister, Bonnie,
Mhm.
who had older than she and had gotten married and had passed away before we were married. Even in
Did you have a car by the time you left Kentucky, or?
no, I didn't have a car till 1926. We had 4 children before we had an automobile.
Oh, well, tell me about your children.
Well, Joe was the first one. He was 6 months old when we went to Washington.
Mhm.
And Guy was born in December 1918. And then Wayne and Wendell, the twins, were born in 1924. And we bought our first car in 1926. We had to make our trips to Kentucky when we made them. We didn't make many by rail.
Mhm.
Then the trains rang. 1926, we bought our first car and drove home. Took us 4 days. Didn't either one of us know how to drive.
Did you ever try to drive a Model T?
I never was able to drive a Model T. The first thing we bought was a used Dodge, and it was a gear shift car.
Mhm. It had a
I never did learn to drive a Model T car.
Yeah, well, a lot of people had trouble. They learned on a Model T,
Yeah,
and then it was difficult for them to
go to shift.
change over.
I never drove a Model T car. The first was a Dodge touring car. We wrapped all of our luggage in suitcases, wrapped them with oilcloth so they wouldn't get wet because you didn't have any trunks.
Hmm.
We just tied them on those running boards, you know.
They did have a big running board on each side.
Yes,
but-
and you could buy one of those racks you could fasten on there
Mhm.
and tie it up to your door handle, and we tied our suitcases on like that.
Yeah.
Kept two doors we could get in. There's a 4-door. I could get with the door. I was the driver. My door I could open, and the right-hand rear door we could open. Others we had to climb over because they had as much luggage.
Ralph Nader wouldn't have liked that, would he?
Probably not.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now,
But I moved. I started working, if you're ready for that,
yes.
in 1918. I started working in office auditor for the Treasury Department in Washington. At that time, there were 6 auditing offices and a comptroller's office.
Hmm.
In 1921, I believe it was, they combined those all into the General Accounting Office. But I remained in that office and some parts of it for almost 39 years that I worked for the government.
Hmm. Now, you must have liked education a lot. Do I understand correctly that you went to law school?
I went to law school. Soon after I got to Washington, I realized I didn't have enough education to compete with the law graduates I was having to work with.
Hmm.
So I took 1 year in accounting, patient-based accounting, dropped out for a year or two, and then I went back to law school. And at that time, we were working 6 days a week.
So you had to go at night.
Had to go at night, and my night school, if I'd taken a full course, would have been 6 nights a week.
Mhm.
Yes, it was. We had 4 nights per week. I worked 6 days a week and went to school 4 nights a week.
How many years did it take you to come up with a degree that way?
4 years.
Hmm.
It was a 3-year school,
Yes.
but when you got it divided up, you had trouble working it in.
Hmm.
I did go to school some in the summertime, but it took me 4 years to do a 3-year course.
Well, that was pretty fast.
That's pretty fast for 6 days a week. And,
It's most people now find it hard to believe you worked 6 days, but in a
That's
lot
right.
of my first job, I worked 7 in the radio business.
That's right.
But now
Well-
everybody almost is working 5 days.
Well, I worked 6 days a week and went to school, about an average of four nights a week.
Mhm.
At times, I went 6 nights a week in order to get in all I had to have. and I finished school in June 1931. I was living in Virginia, and they were teaching us the Virginia law plus law in general.
Mm-hmm.
So I took 6 months to study at home to prepare for the Virginia bar. And I passed the Virginia bar in December 1931.
Mm-hmm.
Finished school in June 31 and passed Virginia bar in December 31.
All in the same year.
Same
Well,
year.
that was, I'd
I'd
say,
never- I'd
quite an
ne-
accomplishment.
I didn't practice law except as it was needed in the work I did.
Mm-hmm.
They required it. Well, just before I got through my assistant chief.
That is, you didn't set up a private
Didn't
practice.
set up a private practice. My chief called me and just before I finished, he says, "You'll be through this year." I said, "Well, if I pass exams," he said, "I don't have a doubt about that." And
But you were a little worried, I guess.
well, I was studying all I could, but he says, "Well, we're going to move you out here to another job, and you'll be through. It requires law graduates, but you'll be through for your 90-day detail is up."
Mm-hmm.
And I did. He detailed me to the high grade work for 90 days, and I passed the examination and
Now that, of course, gave you a little raise in salary.
gave me a raise in salary and put me in line for other jobs that did require law.
Mm-hmm.
And that I went on up as a law examiner. And when I retired, I was a adjudicator, reviewer, adjudicator, and claims were mostly claims against the government, various kinds, everything. But it was my job to review those settlements made by other people, and if I thought they were correct, I signed it and went through.
Mm-hmm.
Very few of them came back, but
Were there nearly everybody in this country that was leaving and going to work went to Detroit,
that's right.
but you chose to go to Washington.
I rose
Were
to
there many other Kentuckians around?
Yes, there were several. Clay Walker was there, and the Shamble girl, Mary, and the other girl, Shamble girl.
Mm-hmm.
Several of them came up there.
What
And
about?
Fannie Minner and her husband came.
Yes.
A number of them did just what I did. They took examinations and came up to Washington. Worked in different departments, agriculture and various things. But I was in the Journal Accounting Office, and it was based largely on law, on contracts and the government law involved. And my whole life, almost 39 years.
Mm-hmm. Now, I believe I heard you say one time that you knew Otis Mahundro. Now, he was
Yes.
from West Kentucky, wasn't he?
He was from eastern part of Marshall County. He taught school in Marshall County.
Mm-hmm.
I knew his wife. She taught.
Now, was she
She was Vera Ford. She taught at scale. She was down in the northern part down there.
was she kin to Homer Ford?
Not that I know of. If he was a distant relative.
Mm-hmm.
Her father was George Ford, and Homer's father was George Ford. But as far as I know, they were not related if they were a distant relative.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a teacher, and that's where she met Otis. They were both teachers. I was a teacher, and Clay Walker was a teacher. Mary Shamel, and I believe what was her sister's name? Was it Lillian? Anyway, Fannie Minner, I believe, taught school. I'm not sure. Several of us kids, I say we kids, went to school here at Benton some. I wasn't a high school graduate. I was just chipping in
But
wherever
after you got the law degree, it didn't matter.
No, it didn't after you got the law degree. Then we kept going. And
I know when Murray State was founded, there were many, many people that were adults and
Yes.
had taught school for years, and they never went to high school. But
Well, I didn't go to high school.
some of them finally graduated from college.
Well, I finally agreed. At the time, the D.C. required high school or its equivalent.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got ready to go to school, I had 2 years teaching. I had to get all these stuff. Got 2 years teaching in Arlington there in Washington and Kentucky. I'd had a year in accounting, and I'd had 6 or 7 years auditing accounts, balancing checking accounts. I had my job for a long time till I could balance my account now. Only we had larger accounts. We had to take those government accounts and balance them out. You had to balance them right out to a penny.
Mm-hmm.
Then after I got my law degree, I got in on the examination of claims, and from claims examiner as a reviewer, and then on a group head, and then on a reviewer, and eventually I believe my last title was review adjudicator.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to sign it. I had to review it, and be pretty sure it was correct, and then sign my name to it, and it went through and was paid.
Well, that was an interesting kind of work.
It was interesting work. It was hard, but it was interesting. And you were always working for something.
Mm-hmm. I was doing a little history of Hardin School, and somewhat surprised, I guess. I didn't know exactly where Otis Mahundro grew up, but I noticed that he had been enrolled at Hardin High School.
He had.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that. Otis was teaching a little further up in the county. His father lived, he told me, just a mile above where the ferry used to cross Tennessee River up there.
Up around Egner's Ferry.
Egner's Ferry.
Mm-hmm.
He up in that part of the country. But he was in Marshall County and taught in Marshall County. Met his wife in Marshall County. I didn't know Otis very well, and I had met him, but I didn't know him too well, so I got to Washington.
You
I
know,
did know his wife pretty well. She lived down near my sister's.
Our half hour's about gone. I wonder if you have any special thing you'd like to say. Maybe something funny that happened to you over the years, or maybe you can tell us about your grandchildren. That's always a good topic. Do you have grandchildren?
I have 4 children. I have 9 grandchildren and 10 great-grandchildren.
Yeah.
And we've been very lucky. We've lost only one daughter-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Died of cancer at 36. The rest of our children and many of my children and grandchildren are teachers.
And your wife lived till what, 3 or 4 years ago?
Yeah, she lived to be 84 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm 90.
Well, I certainly thank you for the interview. It's been a pleasure.
And I can say this, that I've had 2 or 3 of my sons have been elders in the church, and I was 16 years a deacon and 16 years an elder. And 3 of my children are teachers. 3 or 4 of them grandchildren are teachers.
Mm-hmm.
All lined up in the school business.
Well, that is wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us.
It may not sound good on paper, but that's kind of the way I remember it.
Well, good. We think it'll sound real well. You've just heard another oral history interview, and today we've been speaking with Ezra Bloomingburg from Elza Bloomingburg, excuse me, from the Oak Valley community originally, who taught school in the county and married in the county and so on, and worked in Washington, though, for many years. This is Ray Mofield speaking. We return you now to our studio.